You ever read an ancient text and wonder, is there something more here? Something that science is only just now starting to catch up with? Well, sometimes a story that feels like a myth is actually hiding a surprisingly advanced blueprint. We're about to dive into one of the most incredible examples of ancient engineering, where a simple command to build a wall turns out to be a recipe for a real-life superalloy.
So, our story kicks off with this powerful king known as Zul-Qarnayn. He travels to this remote land, and the people there, they are being absolutely terrorized by these destructive tribes Gog and Magog. They plead with him for help, begging him to build a barrier between two mountains to keep them safe. But his solution? Well, it wasn't going to be just a pile of rocks.
He proposes a massive wall made entirely of iron. Okay, sounds strong, but then he gives this very specific, really unusual instruction: pour molten copper all over it. For centuries, this has been a total puzzle. I mean, why would you do that? Was it just for looks? Or was there some deeper, more technical reason for such a strange recipe?
To solve this mystery, we don't really have to look that far. The clue is laid out with stunning clarity right there in the source text, the Quran. And what's wild is that it reads less like an epic story and a lot more like a technical manual.
And here's the actual language. Just notice how incredibly precise it is. Bring me sheets of iron. Then, blow until he had made it like fire. And finally, that critical command, bring me molten copper to pour over it. I mean, come on, that sounds exactly like an engineer giving instructions on a job site, right? All right, so let's break that down into a clear step-by-step process. First, he stacks up the iron sheets, filling the gap between the two mountains. Second, he applies intense heat. Blow until it is fire. This is a huge critical step. And then the masterstroke. He pours molten copper all over that superheated iron. So what does modern science have to say about all this? Well, this is where that ancient recipe reveals its absolute genius. We're not just looking at a simple wall anymore. We're actually looking at the creation of an incredibly advanced material. Now, to really get what's happening, we need to quickly talk about what an alloy is. Simply put, it's just a mixture of metals. You combine them to make a brand new material that's way better than the sum of its parts, giving it amazing properties like superior strength or, and this is key, resistance to rust. So let's just see what a difference this makes. On its own, pure iron can be pretty brittle, and as we all know, it rusts like crazy. But when you combine it with copper under intense heat, you create an iron-copper alloy. This new material is incredibly hard, and most importantly for a wall that needs to last forever, it's basically corrosion-proof. You can really see the impact right here. If you build a giant iron wall, its greatest enemy isn't an army, it's time and weather. It's just gonna rust and crumble. But by adding that copper, you're creating a chemical shield. The corrosion resistance just skyrockets, which means that wall could stand for ages. So that copper is doing three very specific engineering jobs here. 1, it chemically hardens the iron, making it way stronger. 2, it acts as that perfect shield against rust. And 3, as a molten liquid, it seeps into every single crack and gap between the iron blocks, sealing them all into one solid, impenetrable mass. He didn't just stack blocks, he literally fused them together. And this all leads to a really fascinating debate. How are we supposed to interpret this? Is it just a symbolic story, a legend about some great king? Or is it a literal description of an incredibly advanced engineering project? The skeptic's view would argue, look, this is just a legend, maybe inspired by someone like Alexander the Great. After all, pouring metal to seal gates was a known, if basic, technique. But the engineering logic points out that the text isn't just about pouring any metal. The specificity of using copper, combined with the command to heat the iron to a fiery state, well, that describes a precise chemical process, alloying. And this question right here really gets to the heart of the whole thing. If the only goal was to fill the cracks between the iron blocks, lead would have been a much better choice. It's way easier and cheaper to melt. The deliberate choice of copper, a metal with these specific alloying properties, strongly suggests the goal was chemical, not just physical. So when we piece all this evidence together, the precise language from the text and the solid principles of modern metallurgy, a very clear picture starts to emerge. This was no ordinary construction project, not by a long shot. And this is the single most important takeaway. The genius of the plan wasn't just in stacking blocks really high, it was in fundamentally changing the material itself. It transformed weak, rust-prone iron into a super hard, corrosion-proof barrier, right there on site. And this scientific conclusion lines up perfectly with how the text describes the end result. The tribes of Gog and Magog were completely defeated. They couldn't scale its smooth, fused surface, and they couldn't pierce its hardened structure. The engineering delivered exactly the result it was supposed to. Which leaves us with one last profound thought to chew on. Was this recipe the result of some lost ancient understanding of metallurgy, a truly remarkable feat of human ingenuity, just way ahead of its time? Or was it something more, a divinely inspired blueprint for the ultimate shield? That's something to think about.